Out there in YW land. I'm Kim, the CEO at YWCA Northeastern New York, where every day we work to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, dignity, and freedom for all. We're so happy to have all of you with us today as we continue our Making Herstory live conversation with an amazing woman in our community who has made and continues to make history and herstory every day. But first, a bit of herstory. I'm going to read something on Women's History Month. Women's History Month is a celebration of women's contributions to history, culture, and society, and has been observed annually in the month of March in the United States since 1987. The National Women's History Alliance designates a yearly theme for Women's History Month. In 2023, the theme is Celebrating Women Who Tell Our Stories. How fitting that we're doing this today. This theme recognizes women, past and present, who have active roles in forms of media and storytelling, including print, radio, TV, stage, screen, blogs, podcasts, news, and social media. And how fitting it is to have our guest, Mary Liz Stewart, from the Underground Railroad Education Center in Albany. Mary Liz is one of the independent scholars and co-founder with her husband, a public history organization dedicated to the research, celebration, and preservation of documented Underground Railroad history and its relevance for today, with an emphasis on African American abolitionists and freedom seekers. Mary Liz tells stories of history, bringing to life the challenges and triumphs of Black women throughout history. So welcome, Mary Liz Stewart.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience some of the great things that have been and continue to happen in our community.
We're so proud and honored to have you. We'd love to start our conversation with name, which we know is Mary Liz Stewart, and what you do and who you are. How did you come into this job that you currently have?
Well, I'm currently executive director for Underground Railroad Education Center. Have been in that role, I think 10 years maybe. But where this all started was back in the late 1990s. I was looking for documented accounts of local Underground Railroad activists that I could take into my classroom, of very tangible 10-year-old, fifth-grade thinkers who really were convinced that the Underground Railroad had to do with subways and above-ground trains. So I thought if I could take accounts of real live people from the community into my classroom, it would hopefully help my students understand this period in American history better than they were seeming to do otherwise. So I started a deep dive with husband Paul into local Underground Railroad activities and found that what we thought would be a very easy process turned out to be something far more challenging than we anticipated. But we decided, well, let's give it a go anyways. And as we were reading scholarly sources, lo and behold, there were references to local people, a little piece here, a little piece there. So it was like putting together pieces of a puzzle. And I have to say, we took this information to our local poets who were incredibly helpful in accessing their resources to bring historic documents to us. And as we delved into the historic documents that we were accessing through the library network, it was like opening up a treasure box. And the voices of people who had been written out of this history, men as well as women, were emerging from these documents, and their accounts of Underground Railroad activism were quite different than what many of us here that we have come to call the standard retelling. And so it's been, so that's what got me to the starting point, if you will, of what has become Underground Railroad Education Center. And it has been a remarkable journey ever since.
Well, that's amazing. Now let's go back a little bit. You talked about into your classroom. So where were you teaching at the time?
I was at Burn Knox Westerlo School District, which is southwest Albany County, and it also is considered a rural school district. But there was, incredible enthusiasm from my students for the information that I was able to bring to them. And it certainly would help, of course, nurture me to say, oh, we're onto something good here, and they're enjoying and learning. And so
now. I'm engaged. There's a commitment. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about your history. So what traits do the women in your family share? How have they informed your opinions of what women should be like? Like, what do you have in your history that brought you into this passion and this trade?
Well, I suppose the most frequent, I guess the thread, if you will, that has shown itself over time is that the women in my family, and I'm thinking back through my mother's and my grandmother's generations in particular, these were women who were not daunted by challenges. My mother in particular was a single parent when I was 6 years old, so there were a considerable amount of lived experiences that were actually, what can I say, for her generation, certainly, um, not necessarily part of what women of her generation were supposed to be doing. She had to go to work full time. Frequently, I would go with her. She had to interact with, a number of males in the job situation that it sort of generated for her opportunities to really become more confident in herself and be strong in her own manner of interacting with the world in general. And so the some of those, I suppose you could say, some of those sort of middle class standard props that might have been available both to support my mother and to support me as I was growing weren't necessarily there. So we tended to depend on ourselves, and to a lot of, what can I say, do it yourself responses
Yeah,
to
yeah,
things in life
absolutely.
that just allowed us to realize that we can do this. We're okay, and we'll keep on going.
So I'm hearing like perseverance and um,
Yeah.
taking on like non-traditional roles. Like you had to,
Yes.
it sounds like mom was mom and played a role as dad, that she was the
Yeah.
breadwinner, but also took care of the kids and made it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty
Very,
amazing.
very well said. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what are some important gains that you think that women have made throughout history? Like where are we? I was there at the museum, and in the home, and just experiencing what that felt like with so much of the original structure of the building there. Can you talk a little bit about that? And through that, because you talked earlier about that the stories aren't right, like what we read in our textbooks, left much to be out of the story. And so bring that all to life
Mhm.
for us.
Okay, well, I'll start maybe, since we're focusing on Women's History Month, I'll start with Harriet
Yeah.
Myers. And I would just like to reference Harriet was a very popular name in this mid 19th century time period, which is the time period to which the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence is interpreted. And I say that because frequently folks will hear Harriet and Underground Railroad and automatically start thinking
Harriet
about
Tubman.
Harriet Tubman. And
Exactly.
and our the story that we share through the Stephen and Harriet Myers residence and all the programming that we generate around that focuses in on the voices of people who have been written out of this history and yet had very
Mhm.
significant roles to play in the success stories of the Underground Railroad movement, as well as in the um, a willingness to stand up to, and as we might say today, speak truth to power. So, for instance, the Harriet Myers story is a very special one for us. Um, as a wife, as a mother of four children, certainly in the mid 19th century, Harriet Myers had a certain set of protocols that she really should have abided by. But we find that, of course, to me, very delightedly, she was not willing to be confined by those protocols, which would have consisted of, the hearth, the home, taking care of the kids, taking care of the house, those very domestic sorts of things. And while that was part and parcel of Harriet Myers' experience, at the same time, she was very willing to actually break state and federal laws to welcome, I should say, welcome freedom seekers into her home, to interview them, to identify what needs they might have, and then go about the business of collecting the resources that would be needed by freedom seekers. So she would then, that would require her to go back out into the community to engage with supporters that she and her husband Stephen and their colleagues interacted with, and gather up those resources that were necessary. And of course, while she's doing that, there may have been need for provision of a meal or meals and temporary accommodations in the Myers home. Of course, she's on for those sorts of things, while also just those daily lived experiences of managing her own children and the space in the house and whatever clothing, maybe there were clothing repair needs that were on her list of things to do for the day, things of that sort. Plus, while she's doing all of this, she is also engaging with other women from the community as they would meet in their sewing circles and knitting circles, which were acceptable formats, with which that women would use to get together and have very political conversations. But while in those circles and knitting circles, they're also producing goods, and then they would sell at bazaars that they organized to raise funds for the freedom seekers and to support the various needs of Underground Railroad movement. So it's like just to me, it's very
like I'm just so in awe of the fact that she basically wore a cape, like Superwoman, during the day doing duties that you said are kind of traditional duties for women. And then, around all of that, doing all of this amazing work for freedom seekers, providing resources, providing conversation opportunities, providing money, and really being, at the helm, at the on that a huge expanse of history making, as a woman. Like that's something I read about in my textbook, right?
Right.
So what go ahead, Mary Liz.
Say that again? I'm sorry, say
Well,
again?
you are talking about, so when I ask about gains that women have made over the years, it seems as if there might be some untold stories of gains we've made. Aside, I mean, obviously the right to vote, all very obviously we need to make sure that we talk about that. But what are some areas that you think Harriet made for us back then? Like what was it that made her so special?
Let's see, what made her so special? I would venture to say it was her desire for justice, her desire for equity. One of the things that we realized in an hour here being when my husband and I were conducting our research early on, and of course it's continued over the years, but what we have realized about our Black abolitionists is that they really took to heart those promises in the Declaration of Independence, those promises to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And they recognized, from their own personal experiences, that those promises were constantly being challenged by structures of society, by laws that supported the institution of enslavement, simply by interactions with, let's say, local businesses, for instance, things that we are well aware of today, where people of color are, they might be allowed to come into a store to conduct business, but the interactions that they have with the salespeople are of a different caliber than what white customers would experience. And so, we find that those kinds of things that we still experience today, sadly, were the kinds of things that Harriet was and her female colleagues were fighting against in their experiences. And so, sort of looking back to those three promises in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, they took them to heart and looked for and acted upon ways within their lived experience that they could make change, to work towards some kind of assurance that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness were able to be a reality. Did they succeed? Well, no, but we're still dealing with issues today that they were dealing with in their time.
Absolutely. So what makes you a good leader?
They worked on these issues. Oh, I'm sorry. So they, as 19th century, mid 19th century women, worked on these issues. But then, of course, other women who followed in their footsteps continued, as we do today, to continue fighting the cause.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. So then what makes you a good leader, and so you are kind of a mouthpiece for history. So how do you kind of see your relationship with these women from the past and the job you're doing today at the museum? And why do we need more women doing these types of jobs?
I see myself as I don't want to say I'm the mouthpiece for, because I have difficulty with that kind of notion, but it has something to do with being able to use my voice to bring voice to those who have been silenced historically. And in the process, I do like to, honestly admit, yes, I'm a white woman. Harriet was Black. Harriet Myers was Black. So, recognizing that that is uh, certainly, something that just sort of interacts with the historic, accounts and so on. But I also try very hard to admit that I do my darndest to try to honor the integrity of Harriet's words and the words of her, uh, so that laying contemporary visions or understanding and my white experience, over what these Black women were dealing with and saying in their day and age. So there is that, there is that aspect. Also, recognizing that again, maybe just referencing the notion, and for many of us today who are interested and concerned about justice, many of us look back at this Underground Railroad as a time when the abolitionists were absolutely great and wonderful and everything was, grand and glorious. And what we find in, again, coming out of the research is that, that's not always the issues for Black abolitionists really did show that they were dealing with challenges posed to them by the white abolitionists, from whom much of this history is, from the perspective of whom much of this history is told. And so it has become very important to me to acknowledge those differences and those challenges so that we can take those experiences and then take a look at where we are today and see
Okay.
where we can find, similar similar situations that we need to address.
Great, great. Now,
So,
talking about perspectives, when looking back at history
mhm,
through the perspective of women or femme presenting folks, we find there is no such thing as a single perspective, right? We just talked about that.
okay,
American history has
yeah.
looked differently depending upon the view of each woman in time: trans women, immigrant women, Black women, Latinx women, Asian women, disabled women. Why is it important to look back
Mhm.
at history, recognizing the unique perspective of an individual across identities? How is it different from the way we typically look at history?
I would say that looking at history from the voices and experiences of people from different lived experiences, different cultural traditions, brings us closer to not only the richness of the human experience, but also helps us to understand more fully what I tend to describe as this comprehensive wholeness that when looked at and understood from the perspective of a white woman, only gives us a little snippet of how to understand and appreciate this history and its relationship with us today. So by by bringing together the voices and experiences of people um, from multiple perspectives, it seems to me helps us all to see and understand more fully what the reality really is.
That's amazing. I love that answer. When you said the richness of the human experience, that kind of encompasses um, everyone, and not forgetting, we
Mm-hmm.
talk sometimes about a beach ball, right? So there's a red area, there's a yellow area, there's a blue area, there's a white area.
Oh,
Depending
yeah.
on where you're standing on that beach ball, you're not able to see all the other perspectives
Uh,
because it's round. So the point is
uh-huh.
to make sure that you're able to communicate and have discussion around people's experiences to embrace the entire human experience. So I love that. So what are some of
Yes.
the biggest
Yeah.
challenges that women or femme presenting folks face today? How have these changed in the past 20 years, 30 years, 100 years? Are the challenges different or the same?
I would venture to say the challenges are the same. And sadly for me, I see us as being in a situation nationally that is taking us backwards.
Mm,
And it which personally distresses me because I felt like, yes, some forward progress had been made. No, everything was not, oh, wonderful and in good places. We needed still lots of more work to do. But what I'm experiencing now is that so much of the forward movement that had been able to occur, it's as if the foundations of that forward movement are being stripped away, and so we are falling backwards. And it concerns me. I feel like now we're needing to exert energy on areas and on things that, in a sense, had been taken care of, not fully in entirety, but yet had allowed for forward movement. So now by being forced to sort of step backwards, now we're going to have to recoup
Reignite
and
the fight.
repeat those in order to even move beyond them. So yeah, so I am very encouraged by the responses, or the responses of calls to justice that I see emanating in communities, particularly around the country, but even around the world, from women. Women who are willing to step up at great risk to themselves and to their families, to be able, to say, this is not right, and we need to make a change. So I find that, being aware of those kinds of responses, again, nationally and around the world, do nurture me to keep on going in my little tiny, spot in the story.
So, talk about something that people could do to continue this fight, or to work against discrimination against women and femme presenting folks and the identities of women all over the world. Like, what else could we be doing?
My thought would be to really think about how one thinks. And I say that because all of us grow up within an experience that is our norm, is normative for us. And that influences how we see the world, how we think about other people, how we think about our place in the world, what we value is important. And what I would, I guess what I would like to say is, and what I would like to ask is, take a hard look at, and it's not something that happens once and it's done. It's a lived experience. But keep taking a look at, how how you think about that neighbor next door, or how you think about that person walking down the street who might be dressed in a way that makes no sense to me, but has purpose for that person, or things of this sort. And even also think about the power of language, which, again, based upon the world in which we sort of grow up and interact, there's a degree of normativeness about the language we use, we think about, or think in the language we hear. And just, be mindful of the power of language, and how you and I may use the same word and have different interpretations or different feelings related to that word or phrase. So those would be two things that I really would like to offer as, as ways to make change.
Okay, I love it. I love it. And those are tangible things. One,
Yeah.
being mindful of language and how we use it and how it can affect other folks, and
Yeah.
also how you individually, how you think about your surroundings, more specifically the humans that
Yes.
are surrounding you, and how you react to that.
Yes.
And therein is
Yes.
self-awareness changing maybe a little bit of how, what initially comes to mind, to what is a healthier way for me to interpret my interaction with the humans around me,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can all live
Yeah.
symbiotically. I loved it. So
Mm-hmm.
great. So here's a good one. So if you could speak with any woman in history, who would it be? And what kinds of questions would you ask that person? You're sitting on a park bench at the, and sitting by the river, and this person can appear out of nowhere.
Yes.
Who is it?
Honestly, I would think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I would want to. My probably my very first question to her is, how did she manage to survive with her compassion and her sanity intact? um, and I think about that in terms of, the things, the issues that she needed to deal with, and the oppositional perspectives on issues that she held dear. And I see her as someone very very desirous of seeing justice and equity be available and ensured to every person, and yet to be in an experience where those values were being frequently challenged, um, and sometimes on unfounded um, prescriptions, if you will. And so she would be someone I would very much love to delve into a conversation with, and
Absolutely.
see
Such an
how
interesting
she did
and
it.
yeah, it's amazing what she accomplished, as you said, with all the opposition that she faced,
Yeah,
but with hope and an idea towards the future. And what
yeah,
she wanted to make sure was here for the women and presenting folks that came behind her. And so, an
yeah,
amazing person to sit on a park bench with, I would think.
yeah.
Um, so to wrap this up, I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug the museum and the house. So can you just give us some details about what happens there, how people can get engaged there, when people can come see it, the phone number, anything you want to shout out so that we get more
All
people there.
right, thank you. Okay, thank you. What Kim is referencing is the Stephen and Harriet Myers Residence, which is a documented, award-winning Underground Railroad site located in 194 Livingston Avenue in Albany, and it's a great place to come, where we work very hard to make sure that our focus is bringing forward, as honestly as we can, the voices and experiences of people, fully Black abolitionists and freedom seekers, people whose voices and stories have been not included in the American narrative. And so certainly would love to invite folks to pay us a visit, check out undergroundrailroadhistory.org, or simply Google Underground Railroad Education Center as a way to connect with us digitally or online, and in turn, give us a call, and let's make great things.
Mary Liz, talk a little bit about the summer program. I'm assuming you'll be having it this year with the
Oh yeah.
archaeological digs. So could you tell us about that?
Sure. We're looking forward to actually an adult archaeology camp. We do have a youth archaeology camp that we partner with Hartgen Archaeological Associates to conduct. But we also have an adult camp that runs for a week, and both camps are really enriching and great experiences, because it's about real archaeology. We don't bury things in the ground and then look for people to come and uncover them, but rather they do the real deal, learn how to read soil, so that by different colors and compactness of soil, they can identify time periods. And it is the actual engagement with digging in the dirt, getting your hands dirty, but also uncovering what we call period appropriate artifacts, which relate to the story of Stephen and Harriet Myers and their colleagues. So it's a great way to engage with history and have a lot
I
of
love
fun
it.
while
And
doing it.
I know I'm considering of signing up. So I just want to show everybody this quick flyer. I think I can do this. Is the Underground Railroad lives here. Just some additional information, who we are, what we do. So I recommend everybody trying to get themselves and their family, their friends, schools down there, make appointments to go see the building, the grounds, the spring. It's beautiful. There is actually a garden that is there that is period
Yeah.
specific to the
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yeah.
and a lovely opportunity. I want to say thank you to Mary Liz. Some of the things Mary Liz shared with us today, speaking truth to power, not being confined by protocols, providing resources, bringing voice, desire for justice and equity, and richness of the human experience, and really trying to change the way we think, or at least be knowledgeable and realize that we all think differently, and to maybe work on changing that a little bit, as well as listening to language and knowing that every word that comes out of our mouths may mean something different to somebody else, that could really bring communication together if you really take the time to dissect that. So we so appreciate you being a part of this, Mary Liz. Is there anything else you want us to know about the work you're doing or about you?
Oh dear, that's a big question. I think what I would simply like to say is, to viewers is stay the course and believe that, that your work is valued and will make a difference.
Wonderful. So thank you for being part of Making Herstory live streaming event during the month of March. You truly have made history or herstory in so many ways here in our community. Thank you for all you do out there in YW land, all of our viewers who are watching this saying, now I'm going to get myself down to Albany on Livingston Street and check this place out. I want to know the real history. So we want to thank our viewers for spending time with us. And next week, I want you all to join me on Wednesday, 3/29 at noon, when I have an in-depth conversation with Bernice Rivera, who is the Schenectady City Schools Board President, and culminate our month-long celebration of women making history with Marion Porterfield, the Schenectady City Council President, on Friday, March 31st. So we are not done yet. Mary Liz, it has been a true honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you again.
Thank you.